Hi, everyone. I am going to give everyone a few more minutes to show up. There's been some technical difficulties. It's given people invalid error codes. I think I've got it figured out. I've sent a couple people not a new link. It was something with the passcode, but I changed the passcode in Zoom. So now everybody's passcode should work. We'll give it a few more minutes, let everybody sign up, join in, do the things. I'm sorry if it's noisy. And I'm at the beach and I can't really turn the ocean down. Sorry, not sorry. So yeah, I'm just gonna give everybody a few more minutes to join in. Looks like I have a couple people here. I know I have two or three more actively trying to log in right now. So we'll give them some time to figure it out. All right, looks like it's working. So hi, if you're live, welcome to Surviving the Holidays with Setting Healthy Boundaries. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry if you're watching the replay due to set technical difficulties. I still have a couple of people messaging me that just they can't get through for whatever reason. I've done as much troubleshooting as I can. I'm so sorry. I wish I was like the tech geek I used to be and knew all the answers, but I'm surprised I have enough signal in the middle of, Hawaii to sit under this amazingly shaded mango tree. I guess. I don't know. I think I just made that up. Mangrove? It might be, it might not be. I'm not real sure. That's just the word that came out of my head. I'm going to Google it later and see if I was right, because that'd be really funny if I was. Anyway, you don't care about where I am or what I'm sitting under. You want to know about boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, especially before the holiday seasons. Of course you do. So I want to start off with what boundaries are not. They are not a way to be controlling or powerful. It's not about retaliation or being mean. You don't have to feel guilty for setting boundaries. It's not necessarily confrontational, and it's not about being on a power trip. And I know boundaries get a bad rep because so many people have had so many adverse experiences with either not setting them or getting terrible responses when setting them or feeling a certain way when they were set against them or for them. So let's talk about what boundaries are. Boundaries are a form of self-care. They are a way to protect your personal, mental, emotional peace. My personal definition of boundaries is they are the limits we set in our personal lives to protect our overall well-being. And I think that's point blank, that covers it, all of it. Like that's what a boundary is. There's multiple different types of boundaries you can set. There's 5 main ones, and that's your mental boundary, emotional boundary, relational boundaries, physical boundaries, and time boundaries. And I'll go into each of those a little bit more in detail, but I want to cover a little bit more basically about what setting healthy boundaries are. It's a way to protect your relationship. So many people feel guilty because they think it's going to cause a hindrance in the relationship. And from personal experience, not setting boundaries causes more hindrance because you end up feeling resentful. Like I think of a friend, she had her sister move down the street, and her sister would just show up all the time unannounced and, spend time with the kids and hang out and stay for dinner. And yeah, she would bring gifts and snacks and things, and they enjoyed each other's time. But it got to the point where anytime she came over, she would stay real late. It caused the children not to go. The kids started acting up like they weren't doing their bedtime routine because Aunt Sarah was here and they didn't want to go brush their teeth. They wanted to hang out with Aunt Sarah longer, and it just became a problem. So then anytime that Sarah would show up unannounced or would even ask if she could come over, it was like cringy. And it was like, oh, I love you, but I don't want you to come over because all of these other issues. Now, you love your sister, you want her to show up and spend time with your kids and spend time with you, but you hate feeling that bit of resentment. Now, do you think it's fair to Sarah that you feel resentment anytime she comes over or calls and wants to come over? That's not fair to her, and that's not fair to you. She might not be aware of the fact that her existence is a problem for you. You know, she might not be aware of the fact that the kids are acting up because that's all she knows is how they act when she's there. So you not telling her that she needs to leave at a certain time so you can get the kids to bed on at a decent hour or get them back on their behavioral schedule or whatever it is, you're not communicating that to her is causing a hindrance in the relationship. And for someone who loves you and genuinely cares about you and your mental well-being, they should be more than happy and understanding. Like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know this was such a problem. Thank you for saying something. I would never wanna be a burden for you." And we'll talk a little bit more about the different types of reactions because I know that's not always realistic, and most of the time it's not. That's why there's such an aversion to setting boundaries in the first place, which is why we're here. But yeah, so setting healthy boundaries, it's not selfish. It's the opposite of selfish. It's self-care. It's building stronger bonds within your relationships. It's a declaration of consequence to a request being made. So a big misconception about boundaries is, you tell your sister Sarah that she can't show up unannounced. That's not a boundary. It's a request. You're requesting that she calls or texts or something before she shows up, but you're not setting a boundary by requesting something. A boundary is something that you can control. A boundary is within your control, your limit. You cannot control what someone else does. You can only control how you react or behave after someone else does or says something. So, saying, if you can't call or text before you come over, I'm not going to be able to let you in the house. That is a boundary. You're telling them the consequences of the request. I request that you call or text before you show up. And if you cannot respect that request, these consequences that are going to happen, that's the boundary. That's where that line sets. And it's really hard for us to set those boundaries because a lot of times people don't react properly. Well, I don't want to say properly, but they don't react the way that we would want them to. But then also, sometimes we get in our head about setting boundaries in the first place, and we make up stories. We lie to ourselves all the time. Our brains are like 70% recycled thoughts, might even be 90%. I forget the numbers at this point. But our brains are just, we'll say 90% recycled thoughts. And we're lying to ourselves most of the time. There are hypothetical situations and things aren't real. So we think, hey, we're going to tell Sarah that she can't show up, that we would like her to call or text before she shows up or, leaves by a certain time so we can get the kids to bed. And instead of thinking about the outcomes in a positive light, we think, oh, she's going to hate me. She's going to regret, or, she's never going to come over again. She's going to think I'm this and this and that. And we tell ourselves all these awful things that 90% of the time aren't true. Like I said, if you're dealing with someone who genuinely cares about your well-being and overall enjoyment of life, they'll be a little more understanding. Now, if you're dealing with narcissistic people, they are not understanding. And setting boundaries is a good way for you to realize how much effort you put into this relationship and how much work you're interested in dealing with. And I'm not saying, like, I want to say this without being offensive, but we all seem to have some narcissistic tendencies. There are things that we do as humans that can appear narcissistic. I'm not talking about, oh, my ex was just a narcissist. No, I'm talking about someone with actual diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. It's a personality disorder and it affects the overall way that their brain works. I'm not talking about someone who just has some narcissistic tendencies here and there. There's a big difference there. And when you're dealing with someone who is an actual narcissist, they they feel like the rules don't apply to them and they are almost defiant and combative because of it. And so dealing with the narcissist and setting boundaries is a big way to tell that you're dealing with the narcissist, and also a good way to decide how much you want to deal with this narcissist, depending on the relationship. Is it a professional relationship? Do you need to look for another job? Can you handle the situation that you're in and deal with it? Is it parental? Do you need to cut ties? Do you need to minimize the amount of time that you're spending with them? So there's a lot of different ways to deal with narcissists, and setting boundaries is probably the healthiest form for yourself in handling narcissistic personality disorders. And then, like I said, you've got the people who genuinely care about you and your well-being, and this isn't always a first reaction. It's hard. We have a difficult time setting boundaries because we feel like we're going to hurt somebody's feelings, because we feel like our feelings are hurt when someone sets a boundary with us. When someone sets a boundary, it attacks you somewhat. You feel slightly attacked, and whether that's long term, initially, at first, or for forever, it depends on your emotional maturity level. But that first initial, like, hey, please don't feed my kid sugar, you feel like you're doing something wrong. Oh my gosh, I'm the worst person ever. And that's not true. That's not real. And we can't help that that's what our feelings are, but we can control how we respond to those feelings instead of just reacting to them. Instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm the worst aunt ever. I gave your kid a soda." No, say, "I understand that's a boundary. I didn't know that prior to this moment. I will do better." And that's a really hard thing to do, to admit that you were in the wrong about something. First of all, to admit that we're wrong is really hard for a lot of people. And then to respond and not react is definitely a learned trait that takes a long time to master. But when you're cognitively aware of the fact that you're responding and not reacting, you take the moment to pause and to breathe. And then you have the people that aren't emotionally mature. You're emotionally immature human, mentally toddlers. And I don't know how to say this without being offensive, but when there was a book, oh man, I can't think of what it's called, dealing with the children, being a child of emotionally unavailable parents. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna look it up and put it in the comments or something somewhere, because it's such a good book, and it talks about how, and I'm not gonna call out boomers just because of their generation, but when you think of older generations, there wasn't a lot of conversations about emotions in general. We didn't talk about our feelings. Boys weren't allowed to cry. God forbid they had an emotion that wasn't just anger or rage or anyway. um, Having emotional maturity is a new concept for a lot of people, especially in older generations. And so when you're dealing with setting boundaries, especially when it comes to like your children with your parents, which is what tends to come up around the holidays a lot, it's really hard for us because we don't understand the lack of emotional intelligence that most of the older generations don't have. And again, I'm not talking in absolutes, because I have met some older people that are emotionally gurus. They're geniuses, and I have learned so much from them. So I'm not like discriminating, but it tends to be the older generation that we have problems with. A lot of times they'll see us as children forever, and they refuse to acknowledge that we're adults and we can make adult decisions. So when we try to set boundaries with how we want to raise our children, it comes off as an attack to them, because, we're the children to them. We shouldn't be telling them what to do. We're the children. So there's that level of emotional unintelligence. And and when I say emotionally unintelligent, a lot of times the emotional unintelligence comes from childhood trauma. And so the emotional level, when you think of a toddler, it's all about me. They have zero concept of anybody else. So when you try to set a boundary, they're going to react like a toddler. They're going to feel offended. They're going to want to kick and scream and shout. They're going to say mean things and do all the things. And this is why we don't want to set boundaries in the first place, because we don't want to deal with that reaction. But if we can understand that that's their level of emotional intelligence, and we're approaching it from that aspect of knowing that they're going to think this is an attack. They're going to want to respond. They're going to want to react and not respond. They're not going to respond appropriately. If we can see them as, the 3, 4-year-old self version of themselves, and understand that that's the level of maturity that they're coming at this with, and have some understanding. I'm not condoning their behavior. I'm not saying it's okay to be emotionally unintelligent. No, do the work. But some people aren't. They're that emotionally immature that they think that they don't need to do the work. They think they're fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you're dealing with that, this is where it's really important to remember that setting healthy boundaries isn't about them. It's about you. It's about protecting your peace, your mentality. And if it has to do with your children, it's about protecting them too. And ultimately, protecting your children, at least in my opinion, is more important than the emotions of grown folks. So yeah, it's really hard to set boundaries because we often aren't with understanding and knowledge and love, and that's why we feel bad or guilty when we do it, and that's normal, that's understandable, and we'll get into some ways to overcome those reactions and to set boundaries anyway and maybe have it be received a little bit better. Let's talk about some of the the five main reasons we need to set boundaries or areas we need to set boundaries in. We talked about your mental space. If you're exhausted by interacting with someone. And I see this a lot of times people will want to talk about politics and religion and gatherings and family functions. Like those are the two of the top three most triggering conversations. Why do we want to have those conversations in a family gathering? That part I don't understand. I don't understand why we're doing that, why we're triggering so many people. Is it because we have some kind of weird sense of entitlement where we think, you know, I'm the patriarch of this family and my opinion matters and everybody beneath me or below me needs to conform. I don't know. I don't know why we're talking about at family functions, but that's usually where the mental exhaustion comes from. And there's people that just expect you to do everything. I used to host a lot of holidays. I ran away to Hawaii this year. It's Christmas. And I'm not hosting, I'm not entertaining, I'm nothing, and I'm fine with that. I'm so beyond joyed. And it's not that I hated hosting. I loved hosting. Actually, I loved having the family over and feeling like the matriarch of the family. I mean, I still feel like that, but it's not anyway. So it's definitely a mental load to host the holidays. You've got to clean the house, you've got to plan the foods, you've got to plan the gifts, you got to entertain people, you've got to have games. You know, there's a lot of things that go into hosting an event. It's not just clean the house and throw some food together and have people show up. No, there's a lot more that goes into it. And so if you're not in a mental capacity to host and deal with, it's not fair for your in-laws or even your own parents to just assume that you're going to host for the holidays. And so being able to say no and set boundaries. And it's one of those things where, you know, if you volunteer to host and you host every year, then it just kind of becomes your thing. And it's hard to get out of if you decide that that's not your thing and that's not what you want to do anymore. But you should be able to if that's the case. If you're just mentally exhausted and you can't, you should be able to set those boundaries. So mental exhaustion is one of the areas that'll come up with making you want to set boundaries. Like we're talking about why you would want to set boundaries right now, and that we're on the mental exhaustion. And you've got your relational boundaries. We talked about earlier how setting boundaries is forming stronger bonds with people because you're not holding on to resentment. You can feel guilty about setting a boundary with someone and that dissipates faster than that resentment for that relationship with. So by telling your sister Sarah that she needs to call or text before she shows up or leave by 8 o'clock so you can get the kids to bed at a decent time, yeah, you're going to feel kind of cringy and resentful for a second. Not resentful, but like guilty for a second, for a little bit while you're doing it. And then depending on how she reacts, you know, if she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was burdening you and the kids. I would never want to be a problem. Let me know if there's anything else I can help with. Do you want me to stay and help put them to get to bed? Maybe that would be something fun we could do, you know? And that's another thing when you're setting boundaries, it needs to be fluid. It can't be like, this is it, this is what we're doing, and this is all or nothing. No, it doesn't have to be like that. It could be, you know, you have to leave by 8 so I can get the kids to bed. Well, what if I stay and help get them to bed? What if I stay and we do bath time and we read stories? Yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens. One of the biggest things about setting boundaries is sometimes they don't work the way we think they would, or we don't like the way that they turned out. We could change them. That's the neat thing about being adults and humans on planet Earth is we have free will and we can change things and adapt to however we want. Now, I will say that when you're setting boundaries to stay consistent with the boundaries, so you can stay consistent with the boundaries and evolve them, if that makes sense. Like you can tell Sarah, hey, I need you to be gone by 8 o'clock is that's when we start bedtime routine. And if she wants to stay and help with bedtime routine, that's something that you can do. But it's never going to be, oh, well, we'll start bedtime routine at 9 o'clock because you're in the middle of watching a movie with the kids tonight. No, that's not the boundary. The boundary is at 8 o'clock, things are changing. This is what's happening. Either you can stay and participate, we can experiment with that, or you can leave. So those are some things you can be adaptable and flexible with your boundaries, but you still have to be strict and consistent. I hope that makes sense. And we talked about mental, relational, emotional, emotional boundaries. And again, this mental and emotional is a very fine line between the two. Like you could be mentally exhausted by dealing with someone, and you can also be emotionally fatigued for having to deal with someone. And I know a lot of times I've been in a handful of one-sided emotional relationships where I feel like I'm giving, 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 but my emotional needs were never met. And when I tried to set boundaries accordingly, it wasn't received well. And after those boundaries were overstepped habitually, I made a decision. And there's been a handful of people that I wouldn't say I've necessarily cut them out of my life, but I've definitely minimized the amount of access to me that they have. There's friends that I've just decided that they never asked how I was doing. They never cared about when I had a problem or I came to them with something. They always turned it into themselves. It was always about that. Half the time, they would even cut me off about what I was talking about to tell me about a similar situation. Now, I will do that sometimes too. And it's not because I'm disregarding what you're saying. It's just because I'm so excited that I have a similar story and I want you to know that I can identify with what you're going through. It's not because I'm trying to invalidate or minimize your experience. I'm trying to just show you that I identify with that. But I do this fun thing where my ADD can be super offensive sometimes. And if I cut you off in the middle of something to tell you a story, I will also mentally remember where you were in that story and come back to it and say, oh, I'm so sorry I cut you off. You were talking about this and you last said that. And then you go right back into your story because I care about what you're saying and I want to hear it. But my ADD is like, hey, squirrel, do this thing now or you're going to forget forever. So I will make sure that, I do hear you and validate you. But there's been a lot of instances and friendships and relationships where I didn't have that. And maybe it was because their ADD was super offensive and they got excited about the same thing, but they never came back to me, which after so many years of that feeling, it's just like, F me, I guess, like it becomes emotionally exhausting because you feel like I'm just dealing with your emotions and I'm just here to deal with your emotions, but you're never here for me and my emotions. And after a while, it just becomes so draining that, if these people called me to have coffee, I would go sit and have a cup of coffee. Like I don't hate them. I I wish nothing but the best for them, but they're not in my inner circle and they don't belong there. And some of them I let live there way longer than they needed to be. Because one of the things about setting boundaries as a form of self care, the more you respect yourself, the more you teach other people to respect you. And the more people don't respect you, the more you realize they don't respect you. And you have to make that decision. I know there's a lot of people that go no contact around the holidays because this is the time of year when you're subjected to things and people feel this weird sense of entitlement, especially the parental units. They don't respect boundaries. And I want to be the first to say, if you haven't heard this before, that it's okay for your children to set boundaries with you. It's okay for your children to tell you no. They are human and they have every right to set boundaries. And you, as someone who loves and cares about them, should be okay with the boundaries. Again, it's okay if it hurts your feelings for a second, but understand it's coming from a place of love. They don't want to have that resentment towards you. Ideally, some people will use boundaries as a form of retaliation. And all the things that I said that they're not, the reason I say that they're not is because they're misconcepted often that they are those things because people do those things. And so obviously there's exceptions to the rules. But when they're coming from a genuine place of love and care about the relationship, and that's why they're setting boundaries, then it's okay as a parent to respect and abide by the boundaries that your children set. That's a lot. Where am I at? Physical. So we should have physical boundaries. There's a reason that they have harassment in the workplace videos that people have to watch. And for the most part, most of us are human beings and decent. And we understand that not everybody wants you to touch them. Not everybody wants you to be this close to their face. There are a lot of people, actually, mostly narcissistic people, that don't respect those boundaries. Most people don't want to invade your bubble or your personal space. And if you tell them, hey, whoa, I'm not okay with that, as a decent functioning human, you should be okay with them not being okay with that. I have a friend of mine who doesn't like physical touch. And she lets me hug her because she knows I love her and it comes from a genuine place of affection. And I hug everybody. And I've actually, like, my oldest child doesn't like physical contact. And when she was little, I would go to give her a hug goodnight. She would squirm, and I didn't want her to feel like that. So I would just like poop her with a pillow or a stuffed animal or something, or make a little stuffy, like give her affection. So that was kind of a fun boundary that we created. But I have the friend of mine who doesn't like physical touch was having a rough day, and my response is, "Oh, I will give you a hug," and she was like, "No." And at first I was like, "Oh." I felt cringy because I went to hug them and they told me no. And you always, I don't want to say you always, I hate talking in absolutes, but it's really hard for a human to not feel some sort of rejection. And so at first I felt cringy because I was like, oh, I tried to touch them unwelcomely. And that rejection felt icky to me. But then I understood, like, they're having a rough moment. What I find consoling would be a hug and affection. That is the opposite of what they need. That's just going to add to the negativity that they're feeling right now. And so when I learned to understand from their perspective that them telling me no, they didn't want to hug was okay. It's a physical boundary that they set, that they needed to enforce, and that I was more than happy to abide by and respect. And I think that's a big problem when you think of people setting boundaries is that rejection. You don't want them to feel rejected. You don't want to make other people feel rejected. You don't want to reject them. But in that moment, if she would have accepted a hug from me, it could have sent her over the edge. She was already having a really rough time. Letting me hug her could have just ruined the rest of it, could have just exploded, you know? I didn't hug her. I gave her space. I let her calm down. She came back. She hugged me to let me know that she was okay. But had that not went down that way, I could have I could have caused her to have like one of the worst days of her life because she didn't have that moment to calm down, and me hugging her could have just amplified it. So again, we talk about setting healthy boundaries creates deeper bond and trust between relationships. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Her physical boundary. I knew that. She enforced that. It protected our relationship. And as a normal, decent human being, you should be able to respect other people's boundaries. If somebody doesn't want you talking this close to their face and they say, hey, man, I need you to back up a little bit. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize I was that close. Sorry. You know, it's a simple, like, my bad. I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be combative or argumentative or defiant. You don't have to take it personally. And then the last one, if you listen to my podcast episode on boundaries, I went off on a whole tangent about time boundaries. And the reason for that is because there is so much disrespect of our time as humans in general. I went off on a whole tangent about work and how the workplace tends to disrespect our boundaries, and how if you get paid till 5 o'clock and your boss asks you to stay till 6 to finish this report or stay until it's done, if they're not willing to pay you, then you shouldn't be willing to stay and do that. We don't work for free. My time outside of hours, I've had jobs where they wanted me to basically be on call if somebody called me or messaged me. So I'm using my personal devices at my after hours time I need to be compensated. Legally, I should be compensated. Either you're paying me to use my personal device, you're giving me some sort of cell phone stipend, and you're paying me an on-call. Because if I clock out at 6 o'clock, I'm done at 6 o'clock. You don't get to message me at 7:30 and ask me to respond to something. I will respond to you the next business hour, especially if it's a Friday at 6 o'clock and I'm off at 5. So a time boundary is something that you need to be mindful of. And then we talk about like hosting holidays. If your time and the mental go hand in hand. If you're hosting the holidays and someone's like, well, grandma's at home in bed by 6 o'clock, so we need to eat by noon. And you're like, I don't see how it's physically. I would have to get up at 4 in the morning to put the turkey in the oven to have it ready by noon so grandma can eat and go home and go to bed. Grandma just doesn't get turkey that day. Like grandma can show up at noon while I'm vacuuming. And this isn't always realistic, but there needs to be a healthy, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a boundary as much as it can be a compromise in that situation. But when we talk about time boundaries, like I'm not going to get up at 4 in the morning to make the turkey. I respect my time to know that I need my sleep. My sleep is one of the most important things to me. So I will not commit to getting up at 4 in the morning to put the turkey in the oven so grandma can show up at noon. We can have it at 2. I'll get up at 6. That's a compromise. But my time is my boundary. I know where I'm spending my time and what I'm spending it on. I'm not always good at time management, but my time is a boundary. And when we talk about these things, your mental, your emotional, your time, your physical, relational boundaries, the reason I bring these up is so you can see where you're lacking in boundaries in your personal life. Are you people pleasing? Are you always saying yes to things? Are you emotionally exhausted and drained? How many times do you leave an interaction with someone and you're just like, oh my God, I hope I don't talk to them for like 6 more months? Like that was exhausting. And that's where you might be lacking boundaries and you might need to do a little more dissecting of the situation and the people. Like, where can I set better boundaries? Like, okay, this person is emotionally exhausting. What if we only hang out for a couple hours at a time? What if I don't invite them over to my house anymore because then they just stay however long they want and I'm exhausted? What if we meet at a coffee shop so then I have control of when I leave and how long I interact with this person? So when we think of setting boundaries like that, there's a lot of different ways that you can set healthy boundaries with people without necessarily cutting them out of your life or going to any kind of extreme. And we'll get into some other ways to set boundaries here in a second. But I wanted to go over the reasons that you might need boundaries, and those 5 things are the most common areas in your life where you need to be like, okay, am I overcommitting my time? Am I agreeing to do all these things? I'm so guilty of that so much. I'm such a yes person. I want to do all the things. I want to explore everywhere. On a vacation in the middle of my vacation, I flew to Seattle to see my daughter for the holidays. I wanted to spend Christmas and New Year's with her. And Seattle's so close to Hawaii. I'm from St. Louis, so I'm in the middle of America, and it's like a 14-hour flight. But from Seattle, it's like not even 6. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna take a vacation in my vacation. I don't want to say impulsive, but the idea popped in my head and it was like an immediate yes. If someone says, do you want to do this thing? If I want to do it, it's an immediate yes. I don't necessarily take in the time to consider, am I already overcommitted? Have I already agreed to do too much? Do I have the time, mental, emotional capacity to actually do these things? A lot of times the answer is no. Like I'm getting ready this New Year's. I'm going to be in a season of no because I've been in too many consecutive seasons of yes. So I need to start saying no and take a moment to just like be at peace and breathe and figure out like where I need to set better boundaries because I do overcommit, say yes to too many things. Um, I have 19 different jobs and all these different projects and all these things that I work on. So it's definitely going to be a season of no for me and learning how to set boundaries to respect my time a little bit more. Your emotions. Do you people please? Do you let people just say whatever they want to you? Do you let them disrespect you and say things? Are you more concerned about how you make other people feel than how they make you feel? Because again, you're not helping the relationship. If they're making you feel a type of way, if they don't necessarily know that that's what they're doing, by protecting them, you're causing a rift in the relationship. You're going to resent them if they say mean things to you. Um, and they might not even know that they're saying mean things to you. You know, I used to joke with my ex and I would say things like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that, you big dumb idiot." And I used to say it all the time. Like I didn't think anything about it. It was just a phrase. And then one day he was just like, kind of bothers me. Like you've been saying it a lot more lately and it seems excessive and it's kind of getting to me. And I was like, okay, I will make an attempt to not do that. It was such a habit to say it that to not say it was definitely an effort, but I appreciated the fact that he was able to present that to me and say, "Hey, this is the thing that you're doing that's bothering me," because I would have hated to keep doing it and to have him resent me for so doing and saying those things, as opposed to the 8 seconds of cringe it took to be like, "Hey, I don't like this thing that you do." And me, who loved and cared about this person, was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I ever made you feel like that. I don't ever want to do that. Let me change. Let me change my behavior because I care," which is ultimately what the you're you're requesting someone change a behavior to care about you and your needs. And so a lot of times we really don't want to set these boundaries because we know that, or we think we know that these people don't care about our boundaries. They don't care about us. They don't respect us. A lot of times the people that respect us the least are the ones that are going to hurt us the most when we do try to set and enforce the healthy boundaries because they're going to be the ones that habitually overstep it. And I think we know that deep down, or do we? Do we just assume that that's going to be their reaction? I'm sure before he came to me and was like, "Hey, you say this all the time. Can you not?" He probably thought I was going to say a million different things like, "Oh, you big sensitive stupid idiot, like just deal with it," or whatever. I could have responded to that a million different ways, and I'm sure he came up with every single scenario in his head before he actually brought it to my attention. And when I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me do better." He was so relieved. And there's so much like weight lifted off of his shoulders because now we're both committing to making the relationship better. He doesn't have that resentment and I'm not causing it. So I think a lot of times we think that our boundaries might be met with resistance and anger and hostility, and they might not be. And we don't know until we try. And sometimes we're too afraid of being hurt by trying. And if the worst case scenario happens, let's talk about how to actually set boundaries, or maybe we'll talk about how to actually set boundaries. And like I said, boundaries is basically you stating a consequence to a reaction that you would like to see change, or a behavior that you would like to see change. So if you go to the holidays and Uncle Joe starts saying racist things and you're not interested in raising your children around racist people or comments, that's a boundary that you can set. You can say, "Hey, we'll show up. I know Uncle Joe's going to be there. And if he starts saying racist things, we're going to leave." That is your boundary. You can't control Uncle Joe and what he's going to say or not say, but you can control your behavior to that action. So if he starts saying things that you're not okay with, you can leave. Or if it's your house, you can ask him to leave. That is a boundary that you can set. Um, I'm a firm believer that we do not tolerate disrespect of any kind on any level from anybody ever. And this was a long journey for me because I was the first in an argument with someone to just go to disrespect. And it's when you start losing that argument, when you run out of valid points to argue your point, whatever, you go to disrespect. It's like, so it took a long time to learn that disrespect on any level is not okay, ever. It's not ever okay. So if you're losing an argument and you can't think of anything clever to say to prove your point, and you just want to come at them, "Well, at least my hair isn't stupid." Stop. Just stop. Just don't. And that also goes both ways. So if you're in a conversation with someone and they're losing the argument and they don't have any other good valid points to argue, and then they start coming with you, you can say, "Well, clearly you've ran out of constructive things to say to prove your point, so you've had to come at me, and I'm going to remove myself from the situation or this conversation or whatever it is." So again, your boundaries is what you're going to do as a consequence or reaction to or response to somebody else's action. A lot of times the holiday season can bring, I want to say, unwelcome guests, maybe unexpected guests, or yeah, unexpected, invited. So how do we set boundaries in those situations? Cousin Jimmy just shows up. Cousin Eddie just showed up on our front door. What do we do? Do we turn him away? He's got nowhere else to go. So there's a few things that you can say in that instance to protect your peace, protect your space. So Cousin Jimmy shows up on the door and says, "Hey, we're in town for the holidays. We're going to come crash here." Say, "Okay, you can crash here for the night or the weekend or however long you deem appropriate." You don't ever say, "How long do you plan on staying?" Because then it's up to them. And when you're setting a boundary, you don't want them setting the boundary. You want to set the boundary. So you can say, "Hey, you can spend the night, you can stay the weekend, but we've got plans after that. You didn't really communicate with us that you were coming, so I can't accommodate past that." So don't put the ball in their court. Don't be like, "How long are you in town for? How long do you plan on staying?" No, I don't care how long you plan on staying. I wasn't planning on you being here, so I can plan on you being here for the next 3 days, and then you got to find somewhere else to go. Again, I'm not telling you what boundaries to set. I'm just kind of giving you examples how to set said boundaries. So these are things that you can feel comfortable doing if these instances show up. There's a girl. She's there. Jessica Miller is her name, and she does a lot of work on boundaries. And she came up with something called Clear. The Clear method is how to set boundaries, especially when you're dealing with older generation and emotionally unintelligent. I don't want to say unintelligent, emotionally immature, because the toddler isn't dumb. A toddler just is immature. So when we think of having these conversations, setting the clear boundary system really helps thwart any of the combativeness. So clear is you're communicating specifically like how. So when you think of talking to a toddler and you think of talking to an emotionally immature adult, you want to you're gonna sit him down. Be like, "You know what, sweetie? I know you really like this toy." So you're communicating their value to you. You're communicating, you know what, Aunt Joan, I really love spending time with you. I really appreciate that you're here. And that's your C, is you're communicating their value. Your L is your limitations. That's your boundaries. I really love spending time with you, but I need you to leave by 7 p.m. at night. I need you to let me know next time you're going to be in town before you just show up. I need whatever. The L is your limits. That's your boundary. And for someone who's emotionally immature, they're going to hear that and it's going to take a second to process. And they're already starting to feel that rejection. You're rejecting them. "Oh my God, I need you to leave by 7. You're rejecting me. You're throwing me out of your house." There is a chance that you set boundaries with these people, but we'll come back to the clear method in a second. But there's a chance, I just want to give you this heads up, that you set boundaries with people who are especially emotionally unintelligent. They're going to react like children. They're gonna call people to regulate their emotions, because when you're a toddler, you can't regulate your own emotions. You need a support system. You need other people to validate that for you. So when I think of someone who has the emotional maturity of a 4-year-old, they need somebody else to soothe them. So when you set a boundary with someone that they reject or they don't welcome, they're going to call everybody and be like, "I can't believe she yelled and screamed at me and threw me out of her house." Obviously, that's not what happened, but they're going to say that because they need that validation. They need that external validation. It's soothing. That's just a risk that we're going to have to take. Know that sometimes that's going to be what happens, because that's how these people are going to react. And there's really nothing that you can do to avoid that, because again, this is their reactions, not you. Your boundary is you stating the consequence to their reactions. So, you know what? If you say, "Aunt Joan, I love spending time with you, but I need you to leave by 7," and she throws a whole fit about it, know that that's it's from she's coming from her own capacity to understand. She doesn't understand that you're doing this out of love and consideration for the relationship. She's she's just feeling hurt and rejected, and she doesn't know how to regulate her emotions, so that's her reaction. So if you can picture Aunt Joan as a 4-year-old who doesn't know how to regulate their emotions, and then understand that that's the behavior that's going to come from this, life's going to be a little easier because you're going to have a bit more understanding. It doesn't mean that their reactions are going to be any more appropriate, but again, it's up to you to determine how much you're willing to tolerate in this relationship. And this is where we often tend to not set the boundaries in the first place. It's because we don't want these adverse reactions. But once again, what if you say, Aunt Joan, I really like spending time with you, but I need you to leave by 7. And she's like, oh, okay, that's not a problem. Again, you don't know until you do it. So don't just assume that you know what the other person's going to say or think or do or feel, because there's studies shown that 60% of the times we think that we know what somebody else is thinking or feeling, we're wrong. And then if it's in a heated argument or moment of like anger, or even where I think it's something like 15% likely to be right. That's ridiculous. So don't assume that you know how somebody else is going to react, because you don't necessarily know what they're thinking or feeling. So setting that boundary is how you learn those things. And again, problem is most of the times that we need to set boundaries with people are the people that are going to want to overstep those boundaries. But again, this clear method, so you communicate their value to you, you limit them, you tell them what the boundary is, and then you explain how it benefits them. Aunt Joan, I love that you are here spending time with me, but I need you to leave by 7 so that way I can get my work done, because I stay up late, I'm on the computer all night, and I don't I don't wanna dread you coming over. I don't wanna feel any kind of resentment towards you being here or start telling you, "No, you can't come over because I have to work." I need that time and that space to finish my work at night. So if you could leave by 7, then I'd be more happy about spending time with you. So you're explaining to them how it benefits them right around the time where that rejection sets in. So when you set your boundary, when you're on the L and you're telling them their limitations, don't over explain. We have a tendency to over explain. And while you're doing all this explaining, they're not hearing a damn thing you're saying. They're feeling that rejection and they're thinking of how they're responding. Um, from an emotionally unintelligent level. I keep saying unintelligent. I want to say immature. From an emotionally immature level, when you give them that rejection, their nervous system freaks out and they actually go into a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So, a lot of times they'll say unrealistic things like, I can't believe you're kicking me out of your house. No, I asked you to leave by 7, not throwing you out of my home. But that's their response. Their nervous system freaks out. So they're not thinking rationally. They're not reacting or responding with any kind of rational thought process. They're a toddler. They're kicking and screaming and throwing themselves on the floor. And you're dealing with it. Um, so when you give them that limitation, you want to be clear and precise and to the point, and this is what it is, and this is what's going to happen, and move on. Don't over explain, because while you're over explaining, they're not listening. So the next step is to explain how it benefits them. So before they can be irrational and say rude things, you're explaining how it benefits them. No, I'm not kicking you out of your house. I'm not kicking you out of my house. I stay up too late to work when you come over, and I don't want to tell you that you can't come over because I need my sleep. I want you to come over more. So if you leave at 7, then, that works out for both of us. So C is communicating how much they value. You value them. L is your quick limitation. E is explain how it benefits them. A is assurance, acknowledgement. Like, I know this is hard to hear. It's hard for me to say this to you, but this is why. The last couple times you stayed till 10 o'clock. I stayed up till midnight, getting my work done. I overslept. I showed up for work late. I don't want to be late for work, and I don't want to not invite you over. Um, and then R is repeat. You repeat the boundary again. Again, we're not over explaining. We're not going into great details. This is the easiest and best way to get the most appropriate reaction. Again, if you're dealing with someone who genuinely loves you and cares about you and has any kind of emotional maturity level, they'll stop, take a moment, get over the initial rejection and be like, you know what? Okay, I'm sorry. I love you. I thank you. I'll do better. And that's the appropriate reaction to have. And if that's not the reaction, that's still not you. That's not your fault. It's not your problem. Even if you did all these things and they still reacted adversely and told everybody you're the worst person on the planet, you're so horrible. Therefore, mentally 4, you're dealing with a 4-year-old. You set your boundaries. They'll either deal with it or they won't have access to you. You need to find what level of consequence comes with those boundaries. So if you set a boundary and they habitually overstep them, well, how much do you tolerate? There's somebody said something about, what's the difference between an ultimatum and a boundary? And an ultimatum is basically your last boundary. If you say, I've said this, I've done this, you keep doing this, you keep going out of your way to do this and not do these things, if this happens again, then I will blank, because that's your ultimatum. I don't like ultimatums like, pick me or her. No, we don't play those games. Ultimatum is, if you do this again, you will lose access to this. That is an ultimate boundary, is an ultimatum. So ultimatums aren't necessarily a bad thing. I know they're genuinely perceived as bad things because they're not presented appropriately. It's usually like forcing someone to make a decision about something that they shouldn't necessarily need to. I feel like if you're forcing someone to decide something, and we're probably the one in the wrong. You should make the decision. You shouldn't force somebody else to make a decision. If it's something, I don't know. We're not going to get into that conversation today. But as far as like an actual ultimatum, that is the ultimate boundary. I've cut people out of my life entirely. I've gone no contact with my parents for my own mental preservation, mental, emotional, all 5 of the things I listed earlier. It wasn't she was mean to me, she said some things, we're not talking any. No, it was years and years of toxicity. And when you're dealing with toxic behaviors, setting boundaries is a way for you to understand the level of toxicity you're dealing with. Because you can just tolerate something forever. Again, causes that resentment, causes those problems and issues in that relationship. And if you're not setting boundaries and you're not having conversations, then you don't know where your limits are. You're not respecting yourself. Boundaries is a form of self-care. So I'm not here to tell you to go no contact with anybody. In fact, that should be a very last-ditch effort. Or if you do go no contact, maybe it's a limitation. Maybe you try going no contact for a couple weeks or months or whatever the situation is, and maybe that works it out. If you have a parent who can't see you as an adult and wants to overstep how you interact with your children. I don't feed my kids sugar, and grandma wants to give them cookies. You know what, grandma? If you can't respect this boundary, then you get supervised visitations. Oh, you don't want supervised visitations, and you're acting like a toddler, and you're telling everybody I'm taking the kids away from you because you can't respect my boundaries as a parent. Then you know what? Maybe we just don't talk for a couple weeks. You sit in your room and you think about what you did. Yeah, exactly. What are some questions, like some specifics that you think are going to come up around the holidays that you're like, okay, you covered some basic stuff, but my in-law specifically does this or whatever. So let me hear let me hear in the chat some of your specific situation. Okay. So you've set the boundary that, okay, so in the chat she says that her parents spend entirely too much money on the kids, and they have a gift limit, like a dollar amount, that they habitually overspend. So a good way to maybe you've set the boundary. Well, the boundary isn't set. You've set a request. The request is to not spend over $200 per child for the holiday season, and then they habitually overstep and spend 5, if not more. So your request is to not spend that much money. So what is your boundary would be, what is the consequence? Do we not accept the gifts? Do we give them back? Do you need to, approve beforehand? Say, one of the boundaries we've set for ourselves and the children is a dollar amount per gift. And you've had a tendency to overstep that every year. So we would like to approve pre-approve the gifts this year. And yeah, and if it's over that limitation, be like, I'm sorry, we can't accept that. Yeah. So this is a good one. This is especially if you have like smaller kids that have Christmas plays and parties or whatever. So this was parents, like grandparents, who want to come and demand time. You know, they're out of towners and now they're in town and they want to capitalize on all of your free time and every waking moment that you have the children, that the kids aren't in school. So a healthy boundary you could set ahead of time is like, hey, I know you're going to be in town this week. We have these XYZ days available to spend time with you and the kids, or for you to spend with the kids. So you can set those boundaries, you can set those limitations, not, hey, when are you going to be in town? What are your plans for the time while you're here? You know, you're putting that in their court, like we talked earlier. You set the boundaries right off the bat. You say the things, oh, so you're going to be in town from Monday through Sunday. Okay, well, you know, we're free Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What times do you want to hang out? So setting those boundaries ahead of time and being like, you know, we're really busy. We already have all these plans with the kids. We know you're in town for a short amount of time, you know, and again, I'm not saying whatever, if you want to have more days or whatever, but setting boundaries ahead of time, like what days, here are the days that we have available to hang out with you and the kids. Here are the days that you can take the children while we're doing our Christmas shopping or wrapping presents or whatever. Like a boundary doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It could be like, here, you're going to have the kids these days, so we can go do other things. But yeah, setting the expectations ahead of time. I know you're going to be in town for a week, but we have a lot of things to do. We have normal routines. You know, kids may or may not still have school, have chores, have other things to do, Christmas plays, holidays. So you pick and choose what days they have access to your family. So that's your boundary. That's your place there. Any other questions? Yeah, that's not holiday related, but it's definitely one of my favorite boundaries is work or in general, anytime that you already have a bunch of stuff. So like planning a friend's birthday party or graduation party or even doing projects at work when you're already like you have all these things happening and someone adds to your plate. You know, I'm already working on all these things. I would love to do this. Which one of these things do you want to do to take off my plate or alleviate or should I eliminate? That's a good healthy boundary, especially like in a work environment, because if you do a good job, your boss tend to add to your plate and give you more things to do. So by just taking on more responsibility, you're going to burn out, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to resent your boss and your job eventually, possibly. So by saying, hey, I'm already working on these things and I don't want to take away from the quality of work that I can provide. So if you would like me to take on this other project, which of these projects do you want me to deprioritize? Which of these projects do you want to give to somebody else to work on? Because I don't have the capacity to do all of them. So like saying no is not a bad thing. Saying no doesn't make you a bad guy. It doesn't make you a bad person. I would appreciate if I give somebody a project to work on and they're so stressed out and overwhelmed that they can't figure out how they're going to do all the things that I've asked them to do. I would rather they be like, I can't actually do that. Can you give it to so and so over there? Because now so and so over here has the opportunity to show me that they can be just as good, if not better, than the other person that I keep giving all this work to. So like saying no ultimately ends up being a good thing. And so many of us are just overly interested in being people pleasers. And I can't stress this enough, but the majority of the time that you are people pleasing, you're not doing anybody any favors. You're overwhelmed, you're stressed out, you're burnt out, you're getting resentful. And meanwhile, you're taking away from other people who don't want to make you feel like that, who could be helping you not feel like that. So it's like, it's just you've convinced yourself that it's this great thing and it's not. So tell yourself a better lie. And part of me having this conversation about boundaries is tied into the 12 archetypes of the dark feminine I'm running a course on that you can sign up for. And it basically like it exemplifies like how setting healthy boundaries is a place of self-care and strength and respect for yourself. And it's one of the biggest components of the dark feminine because as women specifically, we're not expected to set boundaries. We're just supposed to be agreeable and submissive, and that's not real. That's not who we are. That's not who we're meant to be. So setting boundaries is tied directly into the dark feminine. One of my top courses and classes. I could talk all day on setting boundaries, and I'm surprised there's not more examples of holiday issues. But yeah, I've got a podcast episode. It's not as informative as this. It's mostly just me rambling about different ways to set boundaries and why you need to set them. But I hope this was valuable and informative. If you want to go deeper with me, or that was so weird. If you want to go deeper with me on the dark feminine or more into boundaries, please sign up for the course on the dark feminine, on embodying the dark feminine. It's not just for women. It's focused mostly on women because I'm a female, so I have a female perspective and mindset, but men and women all have male and female qualities. So this could work either way for both sexes. Um, want to learn how to embody that part of you that we're meant to shy and hide away from, I'd be more than happy to help you with that. You can sign up for the course in the same place that you signed up for this masterclass. Again, I hope this was valuable. If you want to work one-on-one with me, if you're having some issues with some boundaries and you couldn't type them in the comments, or you're watching the replay, you couldn't make it live, you can also go into the community chat, the Dark Feminine community, and put in any questions or issues or anything that you have in there. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Or you can sign up on my Calendly and we could do one-on-one coaching. I could do a free complimentary session. We could talk about it and see if working together is an option for you. So again, I really hope that this helped. I welcome any other questions, comments, prayer requests, death threats, not death threats. I don't request those. I don't welcome those either, but it's something an old boss used to say all the time at the end of the meeting. So that's just anyway, thank you so much for being here. I love you guys. I appreciate you. And sorry for the technical difficulties if you're watching the replay. Again, we're all learning. So go enjoy the holidays with your loved ones with respect for yourself and your boundaries and your peace, your overall mental well-being. Love you guys.